Afternoon, guys. Here I am again. Another fireside seminar. Uh, on a day of gloom here in Minnesota. You know, last week we were having temperatures in the 60s. How nice that was. It looked like it was going to be a short winter. But yesterday we were thrust back into the dead of winter. There's a fresh coat of, there's 4 inches of snow on the ground, everything's all white, and maybe last November it would have looked beautiful, but today we're getting sick and tired of all this snow and cold weather and that kind of thing. But by the end of the coming week we'll be back in the 60s again. So this time it's short term. But we could have a lot of snowstorms here in Minnesota before we're done with it. Up my steady area, there's still 8 inches of snow on the ground up there, and they've had a lot of temperatures and down to 0 during the last couple of weeks. So the deer up there think it's still the dead of winter. But I'm getting anxious to go scouting, spring scouting, but I have to wait till all the snow's gone, and then we'll do it. But anyway, we'll get back to where we left off the last time I talked to you. We were talking about Standsites, good places for Standsites. And so I got a list of them that we're going to go through here fairly quickly, I hope, because I've got other things I want to talk about today. But here's number 1. This is a watering spot. Now, we've taken some really nice bucks in the last 20 years at watering spots, and but we don't see big bucks there as often as we do at feeding areas and or buck hunting or buck bedding areas, and so we kind of ignore them. But once in a while we can't leave one alone. We'll be out there scouting in the fall or spring. We'll come to a place where there's really a well-worn deer trail crossing a stream. And the stream that I'm thinking about is no small little trickle in the woods. It's a rushing water, and it's knee-deep or deeper, And there's places where it's a little shallower. It's kind of rocky and gravelly, and the water is running fast, but it's shallow there, and you can walk across in high rubber boots. You wouldn't need hip boots to get across in places like that. And the deer love to cross in places like that. So you see a well-worn trail where deer have been going back and forth across a stream. Now, normally they don't do a lot of stream crossing unless it's important. And in this case, almost every case, the important thing is maybe a feeding area on this side. And the deer are living over here, they want to go over here and feed here and then go back to their bedding areas on the other side. And boy, they can keep a trail looking really well worn. You'll see a picture here in a minute. A big buck and still in velvet in a stream, where he drank water, and and you can see the trail coming down out of the woods, coming down the bank. But boy, that's a well-used trail. There's just dirt. Spots like that can be really good, especially in early morning or even late morning. Whitetails, it kind of depends on where they are and where the water is and that kind of thing. But the whitetails generally like to drink water in the morning when they get up about 4 in the morning or so, and go to water first and drink water, and then go to the feeding area. But sometimes we reverse it. Like, let's say a big buck is with a doe and that's in this area here, and he got there earlier, or he was with her all night. Maybe she bedded over here somewhere, and so he might be with her while she's feeding, and then he'll be thirsty afterwards, and he'll go down the stream here to drink water. And my son Ken took the biggest buck he's ever taken a few years ago at a spot like that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a watering spot. It could just be a ford, a place where whitetail's been crossing a stream to go somewhere, not necessarily to water. And So whether it's a watering spot or just a place where whitetails commonly cross the stream, that can be a good place for a stand. So that's one. That pays off now and then. So let's look at some other ones. Another good spot is a trail hub. You know, two or more trails coming together in a small area. They don't necessarily all have to cross the same spot, but they can be good, especially if those trails are well used. You know, and especially if some or all of them have droppings, fresh droppings, or tracks of big bucks on them. And most times you see trail hubs in or very close to feeding areas. It might be part of a feeding area, or might be just on the edge of a feeding area. Like maybe in a what we call a staging area. We talked about that at one of our recent seminars. But trail hubs increase your odds of seeing a buck. If there's buck tracks and droppings on them, of course, they greatly increase your odds of seeing a buck at a stand site when you got more than one coming together. So keep that in mind. One trail, unless it's a scrape trail or it's really close to a feeding area, an approach trail into a feeding area, may not, that buck, you know, especially during hunting seasons, older bucks have a habit of never using the same deer trail twice in a row. You know, you can go out there in the woods and, oh man, they use this trail, and you get all excited about that and sit there, and you can sit there all week and never see the buck. And that's the reason when I find fresh tracks made by a big buck, where that's an exciting find, I want to know more about why the buck walked there. And if he walked there because he went to a feeding area, well, he might use trails coming from all around the feeding area, depending on the wind direction in the coming days, and never use that trail again during the hunting season. And so if you're here and there's no feeding area or bedding area nearby or watering site nearby, your odds of seeing that buck on that trail are not very good unless he's maintaining ground scrapes or maintaining ground scrapes on that. And that usually happens during the last 2 or 3 weeks of October and the first few days of November. And after that, that's the end of that. That's it, you know. So most of the other time, it's not a good idea to sit next to a trail used by a buck unless there's a good reason for that buck using that trail again in the near future. And there could be lots of reasons why the odds would be good, like the area, deer are funneled into this area going around swamps or bogs to get to this area over here, that doe range there, and this doe range thing here, or things like that. But just because there's deer tracks in the trail, unless there's something there that increases the likelihood that that buck is going to use that trail again soon, maybe later today, or this evening, or tomorrow morning, it could be a waste of time. So keep that in mind. But when you got lots of trails coming together, and maybe more than one buck or the same buck using these other trails, more than one trail in this one small area, that's a good spot. Your odds are much better in a place like that. Okay. Well, there's such thing as a detour trail. This might sound kind of crazy. Let's say you got a stand site right here, and over here is a feeding area, and here's a trail around the edge of the feeding area in the woods, which is real common. Well, let's put your stand site here. And what so commonly happens, especially when you're hunting older bucks, because they're so good at finding and recognizing hunters in trees or at ground level, your odds of, if you're truly in a spot that's going to be used by the buck, like it's going to feed in here, it's going to use this trail, it's going to use this access trail going out there, that kind of thing. If you're there, and this buck used it just like, say, minutes or hours earlier when you got there, and therefore, and he wasn't alarmed, he was walking, chances are real good you'll see him there later in the day during the next feeding cycle in the evening, or tomorrow morning during that feeding cycle, whether a doe in here is in heat or not. Good chance that if you don't see them on this trail, you might see them on this periphery trail or out in the feeding area. So you got pretty good odds for that. But what happens so often, because they're so good at finding people, you can sit here, and if you're one of the guys who likes to go back same stand site all season, well, here's one of the problems you're going to have. The odds are he's going to find you within hours. First half day you hunt there, you get in this stand site, whether it's because of a sound you made or motions you made or the buck seeing you approach in the dark and climbing into your tree stand or whatever it is. If any of that happens during that first time you go there, he's not going to go there anymore, any close to this. He might feed in the same area, but from now on he might feed way up here somewhere, something like that. But so quite often when that happens, you'll find a detour trail around the area. A buck will maybe stay 100 yards away from your stand. Let's say you're going out there in the morning and gee, here's fresh tracks of buck going in the direction that you're heading to. You got a stand site over here. But he's turned and he's going out that way somewhere. Well, chances are what he's doing, he's going around the spot. He's keeping a safe distance away from it. And this can get to be a habit. That can, for the next 4 or 5 years, every time you go to that stand site, you just don't see anything there anymore, but you see tracks of a deer going around this way and detouring around that stand site. So you should be watching for these detour trails around stand site. This is one of the reasons my sons and I change stand site every half day. We never worry about that. They don't form detours around our stand sites because we only use them once a year, or at most once for several hunting seasons in a row, but just 1/2 day for that time, which really reduces, well, even if they find us there afterwards, they'll learn, gee, there's nobody there anymore. They can smell. They go downwind. There's no humans there, and it's getting to be routine. I've been going there all week and never smell a human there, so we're probably okay. But sometimes, you can have a stand site in a spot like that, and you think, oh man, this looks so good. There's tracks all around here made by a big buck, and gee, now there's a doe and estrus, and this buck going out here is dragging his hoofs from track to track. He's out there right now. You think, this is a dynamite spot, and you get out there first morning, opening morning, and you don't see a deer. And there's no reason for it, except for some reason they're not using this trail today or that morning, or they're feeding in some other part, maybe a distant part of that feeding area instead on that particular day. Well, in that case, you didn't ruin anything. And if it was really a good spot and you really had high hopes for it, if you return there 4 or 5 days later, second time, go out there a second time, the wind's just right now, crosswind, or you're approaching from downwind, you get out there. The second time you go out there, it might turn out to be just the way you thought it would be when you hunted there opening morning. And we have taken, over the years, quite a few bucks on that second visit 4 or 5 days later, or a week later. So keep that in mind. A really good stand site that didn't pan out might pan out a week later. Okay. Well, if you've been hunting in your area a long time, and you find one of the detour trails, gee, they're going off through this big swamp or whatever, full of water and that kind of thing, going out that way all the time now, well, you might consider moving and setting up a stand site near there, and it's like starting all over again, but taking all the precautions to make sure it's with tour buck effective. Now we'll get back to that in a little bit. We talked about it a little bit last time, but let's say here's a woods, that's a wood. Well, a wood. Now here's the woods. And, you know, these aren't miles apart. They're, you know, a deer could come and stand here and look over here and see the woods over on the other side over here. And and this is kind of open, say like an old clear cut, or it's just kind of wide open space. The timber is really not very large in this area. You can see real good from here to here. Now, especially during hunting season, and especially bucks, they don't want to be caught out here in the open crossing an area where they can be easily seen during daylight hours. They might do it all night long, but not during daylight. And but if there's like say a little island of timber out here in the middle, and we have places like that, then it reduces the time that they spent exposed. And so if you had a place like this, you know, wide open all around, but it's a shorter distance here, maybe some timber in between, or maybe timber coming way down here like that, a short distance in between. These crossings, they kind of funnel deer movements into this area, and this would be a really likely place for deer to go from one area to the other. So let's say this is a doe home range, and this is a doe home range over here, and the big buck, he's traveling, say, he's maintaining ground scrapes in the latter part of October. He's got scrape routes and here and over here in these places, and he's got a scrape and Antlered close to that crossing here, where other bucks will find him and say, oh, hey, this is a sign the big buck of it. This is his breeding range. So anyway, this kind of a crossing between ranges, this would be buffer zone here, maybe a swamp or something like that, but it's buffer zone between different trails here. So that's another reason. Here's a crossing, or this is a buffer zone trail, a shortest distance across an opening or a tough place to travel, like an elder swamp. So those kind of places can increase your odds of taking a big buck. So instead of being on a trail over here that you found some tracks and there's no reason for it, I mean, no reason to believe that buck's going to use that trail again later today or tomorrow, because there's nothing important close to that. Maybe your odds there are maybe 1 in 12 or maybe 1 in 30 of seeing that buck on that trail. But here, your odds get to be, especially in the last half of October in bow season or during the hunting season, well, does are in heap. And if the buck is traveling from one doe to another, looking for other doe, this could be much greater odds watching crossings like this from one area to another, where they don't want to be exposed for a long period of time, or it's awfully tough to go across because of water and brush and elders and bog and that kind of thing. So crossings are good, improved odds. Well, let's say you're hunting in an area where there are a lot of other hunters, and we talked about it a little bit last time, but let's say back here is a huge cattail swamp. And it's been there forever. And so around the edge here in this woods, this is all woods down here, there's bound to be a perimeter trail. Deer that might be in the cattail swamp, and they want to go somewhere, they aren't going to just go through the cattail swamp. They're going to get on highland here, and they're going to march along this edge here to go somewhere else. And let's say here's a road down here. Now let's say it's 1/4 to a half mile from here to there, this road. And let's say you park your pickup here. Now, during the day, there's hunters wandering around here. Maybe some people even making drives, you know, from along the roadway, you know, they might line up like this and drive it down to some standers down here. There's lots of areas in the region I hunt where guys from town living up in the area, they get big bunch together and they'll make drives along roadways like that. Well, they clean the deer out close to the roadway, these local guys. But generally, most hunters don't want to be half a mile, or even a quarter mile, half a mile away from where they park the vehicle. They'll hunt closer to the road here. Most hunters aren't familiar with huge areas, or even mile deep. So they'll be close here. The further away you get from the road, the fewer hunters you're going to see. So I used to hunt, I've hunted in areas where there are a lot of hunters. And one of the things that I learned to do, if I get out there before first light, let's say I'm going to hunt out here by that peripheral trail. And I want to get out there well before first light, at least a half hour before first light. And in that case, I'll make a beeline to that stand site early in the morning. Get out there, it's dark, you know. You might have that trail marked with some fluorescent tacks, which are hard to see during the daytime hours. Most guys won't even spot them on trees, you know, but it'll help you to get out there early, fast. You don't hunt along the way, you just go straight out there. And there's deer all over in here, in this area, various deer. And so you get right out there and get seated out there at least a half hour early. Well before any of these guys who wander around in the woods, they aren't going to wander around in the woods in the daytime, in the nighttime. They're going to wait till it gets light so they can see where they're going. And the same thing with these guys making drives, you know, they won't start until it gets light either. So you're out there and you've been sitting there and it's been real quiet there where you are. And let's say the wind is favorable also. You know, a favorable wind would be one that blows this way. Meaning, when you went in there, you went in downwind. Now, certainly when you're going downwind, your scent is going to be spreading out ahead of you. But if you walk steady, don't stop. Use the wolf roads that I've been talking to you about forever. Never stopping, just going straight ahead. You got your flashlight, you're looking for your tacks as you go, you know, they light up. You don't shine it all over the wood, just a little ways ahead. And the wider part of the beam, those tacks light up like little Christmas tree bulbs ahead of you. And you go straight there, go downwind. Crosswind would be all right, maybe, you know, but of course your scent would be going to all these deer on this side, but either way, don't worry about wind direction, go straight in there. But it would be ideal that once you get there, if the wind is in your face, you turn around, you're looking into the wind and the wind is blowing that way. That would be ideal in a case like this. You get there early. Now, pretty soon, you know, you're sitting there and you hear the cars coming up and they're parking, you hear people way out there talking and somehow you hear car doors slamming and over there and over there. And these guys in this area are going to be pushing deer out. And those deer don't want to go in the cattail swamp unless they have to. If they're being pushed all the way, somebody's on their trail, and they're all being pursued here, they might go straight into there. But more than likely, they're going to hold off until they have to go. So somewhere along the line, they'll stop and check their back trail and listen and watch and sniff the air to find out if they're being pursued or not. And if they're not, well, then they just kind of stay in this area, but they're going to stay away from these hunters and they're going to gang up along the edge of that cattail swamp. And then you're going to start seeing a bunch of deer sitting there like that. And here's this periphery trail, and there's lots of other deer trails coming into that periphery trail, and they're going to be ganging up there. And in areas where there's a lot of hunters, boy, is that, well, like, so this could be a lake too over here, or a big, wide open air, tilled area, intensely farmed area, wide open over there. Could be that too. But by doing this, You know, and let's say that's a big farm and it's got no trespassing signs all the way around it and that kind of thing, so they aren't having hunters coming from that way. But anyway, or it could be a river, you know, or a railroad trestle, something like that. But at any rate, when you get over here, your odds are going to be much improved. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be much improved for big bucks, but if there's anything that can help improve it, make it possible to take a big buck, this is going to be it. And I call these things backside perimeter trails, and they're a good distance from the road where all the hunters are going to be starting from. And you get out there early like that. You know, some of these guys will be just getting started, and you'll be dragging the deer, you'll be out to the road, and your guy's just coming out, and you already got your big buck. So, good. That's a good plan. Wherever you hunt, and there are a lot of hunters, this is a good plan. You might have to be looking at maps and talking to people and checking to see if, you know, what's on the backside here. But if you can find 3-4 places like that, and maybe here today and over here tomorrow and way over here the next day or this afternoon, that's a good plan. So anyway, that's a good thing to do. And you know, if I was doing this, I would bring a lunch with me. Instead of going back and forth at noon, I would just stay out there. And you might see deer right in the middle of the day, just as often as you might see early in the morning. These guys down here are going to keep them stirred up, and so your odds of seeing that deer along that backside are going to be good all day long. So bring your lunch along, a bottle of water or two, you know, and plan to stay out there. Okay, so that's a good one to know about. Now, I've talked to you about buffer zone trails. Like, you know, like I told you, you know, let's say here's one dominant buck home range, a breeding range. And over here is another one. Or, let's say this is a doe home range, 125 acres, and here's another one over here, maybe that one's 90 acres, and another one over here, maybe it's 200 acres, depending on deer densities in here. It could be much bigger. But whether it's between ranges of bucks or between doe home ranges within a buck range, all the trails will be in those doe ranges. There'll be trails all over the place in those ranges there, where you can hardly walk 10, 20 yards in any direction. You're going to run into a deer trail. But in between those, there may be only a few trails going from one to the other. And those are buffer zone trails. These are buffer zones where deer don't spend a lot of time unless this happens to be a feeding area. So we've talked about feeding areas endlessly. I'm going to talk about them a little more about this. But buffer zone trails are primarily buck trails. Does stay in their ranges unless, you know, they're in danger and they have to run to save themselves. But normally, during the day or any part of the day, these are buck trails. So, if you're going to hunt, you can, buffer zone trails, especially if it looks like it's been recently used, and there are tracks and droppings of big bucks on that trail, or one big buck, that's a good bet. See? And I like to be inside of a doe range. Oh, you could be outside too. But because there's periphery trails inside the doe range, and I like to be able to watch that trail as well as this trail when I'm watching a buffer zone trail. So what you end up with here is a trail hub on both ends of it. So keep the trail hub and that trail in sight, and your odds are going to be much better at taking a buck. And if it's while breeding is in progress, probably, well, you might see Forky's going across those things after they've been chased off range and they're sneaking back. But the odds of seeing the biggest buck in your hunting area are pretty good on a buffer zone trail, if the tracks are there, fresh, and but openings. So keep that in mind. And like I say, usually at both ends you'll find, in the doe ranges, you'll soon find a new antler rub and a ground scrape on both sides. Put all that together and say, this is a good place to hunt a big buck. So keep that in mind. Now we talked about this a little bit too, but let's say here's a big cedar swamp. Cedar swamp over here, and let's say this is a big elder swamp, or spruce bog, or whatever. And over here is a home range of a deer, or a feeding area even maybe. And over here is the woods. There's all woods over here, and it's part of a home range of a big buck, and maybe a doe home range as well. And let's say all these deer want to go over here and feed. Maybe say that's a new clear cut. And they don't want to walk in the swamps to get there. They get squeezed down into this narrow portion right here. Dave got his buck on a spot like that last year. A nice mature buck. He was going from one side to the other, to a feeding area. So wherever you find things that kind of squeeze the movements of deer into a narrow area, lots of trails coming from different directions to go there, and same way here, you know, squeezing together, your odds are much better at getting a deer there than over here, or over here, or over here, or over here. How about that? So, or a big buck. So, keep that, that's a funneling area. Okay. Don't forget funneling areas. You know, you can be walking the woods and there could be all kinds of reasons why deer are funneled into a certain area. Not many tracks over here, not many there, but lots of them here. These trails coming together. I wish I had had my camera with me last year when I was scouting, on the last day, no, next to the last day. I came to a funneling area and it was really amazing. I got up on this high little rocky ridge, and down below was a little valley, and then there was this high steep rocky ridge on the other side, and there was about 6 trails going through that lower area. It looked like trails, you know, made by dairy cows out in the pasture, you know, where they like to travel along. All these trails there, and they were branching together and coming apart, and holy cow, this is really a funneling area here. And back over here, really heavy timber back in there, and they like to bed there, and over here was a feeding area. It's that kind of a place. But boy, all these trails coming together, I thought, I've got to hunt here next year. I've just got to get here and hunt this spot next year. So funneling areas can be pretty good. And then we mentioned saddle areas. Let's say here's a really high hill, and over here's another really high hill. And let's say if a deer over here, like this buck here, he's in this home range over on this side, and there's another home range over there on the other side. Instead of going up over the top of the mountain to get there, he'll go up and down the saddle area. And we've got some saddle areas where we have lots of high hills, some of them with really steep sides to them, where deer go through saddle areas much more often. And we've taken lots of deer at places like that. My old buddy Silver from Wisconsin has been hunting with us for years and years. First year he came, I put him in a saddle on one side of it, you know, over here where the trail goes up and goes between 2 high ridges. And he got a buck. The first evening he was there, a nice one for the wall. A few years later I put him on another saddle area between high ridges in another place, and he got another nice big buck there, right in the middle of the day. The buck was traveling between doe ranges there. So anyway, saddle areas when you see something like that out in the woods, keep that in mind. You know, there's a sense that looks like a saddler. I should go over there and look at that. I should mention too, you know, one interesting thing about buck hunting, we've learned over the years, big bucks love high hills to bed on. Not up on top, but on little ledges below the top. They know better than humans. If I'm up there, I'm going to be skylighted when I move. You know, get up, turn my head, I'm chewing cud. Not good to be up there on the top. So you get on a little ledge toward below the top. And we've got quite a few big hills in our country where are home to big bucks because they like to bed up high. And they like to bed up high because they can see through the woods quite a ways from up there. And way over here somewhere, I'm going to be bedded up there and see, oh, here comes a hunter, or here comes a wolf pack. You know, if something's coming toward them and they're worried about it and they're starting up this mountain, they can go right up over the top and go down the back, opposite side, really fast, really gain distance on whatever's coming up this way. By the time they get up there, oh, they're long gone, way out of sight. But they can go any direction they want from there. Another thing that's nice about it, you know, when it's really quiet in the morning, doesn't seem like there's any breeze at all. The first thing that happens when the sun comes up, the sun finally comes up, the first air to get warm is the air up on the top of the mountain. And what does warm air do? It rises. And so all this quiet air down the valleys below goes uphill. Uphill. And when they're up there, man, they can smell things way down there, all the way around the mountain when it gets to that. Their scents are being carried uphill early morning when it's really quiet. Then in the evening, the sun goes down, and where's the first air to start getting cold? The air that's up high. That starts to settle down, and then all the scents go down, you know, on that side. And so in the evening, they like to bed down below, so nothing can come at them from up here without them knowing it. That's a good thing to think about, you know. Say there's a feeding area here, boy, he's going to be down there in the evening. So, things to think about. Well, saddle area is a good place. They can be awfully good. I remember one year, a farmer in Wisconsin asked me to come and help him scout. He knew he had a big buck on his land, and him and his family, they usually he's a dairy farmer, and there's these high bluffs all the way around his farm, limestone bluffs, which big bucks grow in limestone bluffs in Wisconsin because limestone, water that comes from limestone is rich in calcium and phosphorus, which lends to greater antler growth. And if their genetics are halfway decent, those bucks will get a lot of mass in their antlers there in Wisconsin. Some of the best bucks in Wisconsin come from those big limestone bluff areas. And he was in one of those areas, one of the best, as a matter of fact. I won't even name the county, but it was a good area. And he knew he had a great big buck there. They'd seen it a lot. And he wanted to know how he could get it. So I went over there, and we scouted all over the place. And there was a saddle area in one place, two high bluffs and a lower area in between, all full of brush. And it wasn't real low, you know, like I just showed on this map here, but it was lower than the other area around there. And it turned out that this great big buck had 4-inch tracks and big wide rock, because I've seen places where he'd been rubbing antlers on a bush, and the bark was peeled way over here and way over here. And I said, holy cow, that thing has got a lot of spread in his antlers, you know, and just kind of tore up that bush. But anyway, this is where he beds. And then we did some more exploring, and I found a little stream coming out of the side of a limestone bluff. A little stream trickled going down the mountain, not more than a couple of feet wide, but a little pool there where the water kind of pooled. And look at all those tracks. That buck has been drinking water here. And that water is about 100 yards away from where he bedded. Big beds, great big 55-inch beds, something like that, in grass in that brush. So I told him, I said, well, if I was hunting this buck, I'd be sitting in a stand site between these two spots. You know, there's corn down below, he's gonna go eat corn, but he's gonna, this is two areas he's gonna predictably return to or go out to during the day. And I really like that tree over there, and look at all the cover around it. You can, you'll have to make a trail, you know, through all this brush, and mark it with tacks so you can get to it early in the morning. And you want to be careful about wind direction, because you can't hunt this spot if the wind is from the south. It's got to be from east, west, or north. But if you do it right, you can hunt there at that spot, and that's where I'd hunt. Well, I run into this guy at a sports show during the winter, late winter, about a year later. And he comes up to me and he says, Kenny, you know, I really screwed up. I said, well, what happened? Well, he said, none of the family was interested in doing any stand hunting. We had to make our usual drives. So we made our usual drives all around the farm and all the bluffs, you know, one side and then the other. We got a bunch of deer, but nobody ever saw the buck. And then after the season ended, and then the bow season continued after that, one of his neighbors who had been with us that day when we were doing it came over and asked me if it was all right if he did some bow hunting in that spot that I had suggested. And so, and here's a picture of the buck. It scored 186, I think he said. It's really a nice buck. Just, damn it, if I had done what you said, I would have got that buck myself. It was really a nice one. So, but that's just another story here. But it goes along with these steep hills and high hills and saddle areas and things like that. Another trail, and I've taken deer on trails like that, but like here's this big alder swamp out here. It's just a tangle and a mess, and out there, and I found tracks of a deer running. You know, their tracks form a kind of a like that when a deer is bounding, and and these track formations are about 20 to 25 feet apart. You know, let's say a big buck, boy, is he going, you know, and the distance between these are like 20 feet apart, and he's really going, and you know, when they're running like that, these are the prints of the hind legs out in front, and these are the front legs, and when they come down, it's just front leg, and hind legs come up in front of the front legs then. They got all this momentum going, and when they get to that point, those tracks look a little long because that they don't. When they come, the hoof comes down. It comes down flat with the dew claws touching the ground. So there's greater distance length there, and so they got good traction. And those big, powerful hind leg muscles just push that deer right up into the air with those two hind legs there like that. And these come forward in between there, and they kind of live 20, 25 feet, 8 feet up in the air over the brush, and boy, can they go. Well, there have been times when I thought, you know, look at that buck took this trail going out into the swamp. And I didn't want to go out to this water all over, pools of water all over. But there's where he went. And let's say, gee, last year that buck did the same thing, went on this trail into the woods. So in succeeding years, every once in a while I'd remember these things, and we'd end up putting a stand site somewhere close to one of these escape trails and figuring, well, boy, if that buck ever takes that trail again, we'll have somebody there. And we took several bucks over the years, including some of the biggest that Nordbergs have ever taken. There are trails like that. Those are escape trails. Now, normally, you know, you got to be able to shoot pretty good at a bounding buck. And I've never been real good at it, and that's why I've learned to hunt in a way that I get real easy shots at short range, at big bucks. But I've known several hunters, including two of my own, especially my son Ken, who's taken bucks while they were in the air. The height of their big bounds going by his stand sight. And he shoot them down with a single shot through the chest like he's shooting ducks. And he's a good duck shot too. But boy, a big buck could be coming like crazy. He hears him coming, and Jesus, big high swing, and he, pow, it's still up in the air. You know, it's kind of going with it and running a little ahead of the chest area, because by the time he pulls the trigger, the deer has moved quite a ways already, right? When he, between the decision to shoot and when he finally shoots. So he's good at that. I've never been good at that. So I don't even try for that one. But these trails going out into big swamps or bogs can be places where your odds of taking a big buck can be real good, especially where you got hunters walking around the woods out there during the daytime. So, another good one. Maybe not as good as a lot of them, but that's a good one. Okay. Now, we've talked about all kinds of things. And we talked about stand site areas. We're still not right down to well, last time we talked about what your area should look like, right here, like that. But here's another trick you should know about. I mean, this is important. You know, we're always careful to never go downwind to a stand site. We'll crosswind. Actually, we like it to be a little less than crosswind. Let's say you're heading to a stand site. If you're only going to hunt there in the morning, or only once in the evening, coming from downwind is fine. But when you do it, remember, you're leaving fresh trail scent all the way to your stand site. That trail scent is easily smelled by whitetails 4 days, or sometimes longer, depending on how intense it is. The major scent might be the smell of rubber from your boot soles, but it'll be there for 4 days. And when they smell that in that 4 days, they don't want to go where you went. And they can tell which direction you went simply by noting differences from track to track, like a bloodhound can do. They know which way you went. And you ever see a whitetail come on your trail and sniff the thing, invariably he'll turn his head in the direction you went when his head comes up. And that's kind of amazing. Boy, what a good sense of smell. Well, smell is 10,000 times or more greater than our sense of smell as humans. So, anyway, keep that in mind. But anyway, let's say you're heading to a stand site and the wind is coming right toward you. That's fine. But like I said, I recommend in the afternoon you always go in crosswind. And so you aren't leaving a trail scent behind from the direction the whitetails are going to come, like say to a feeding or a bedding area. They always come from downwind to make sure nothing's ahead of them when they're heading in that direction. So crosswind is all right, but like I was saying, I like the crosswind to be a little bit more of an angle coming toward me, so it's blowing on this cheek, right at this cheek, not rather than right at my ear. And the reason I want to do that is say, here's the feeding area out here. Now, if it's coming this way, your scents from your body are going to be spreading out through a triangle area downwind out here. And the closer you get, pretty soon, it's going into this area over here, you see? Now, what if those deer are down there, or they're just coming and they get into your downwind scent? You're sitting here, stand site. You aren't going to see those deer. Not only not today, but tomorrow and maybe never the rest of the hunting season. So there's a human hanging around there, waiting in ambush there. Or let's say it's your food plot. There's a human guarding that food plot over there. We don't want to go there anymore. While there's humans around here, I don't want to go there. Now, if the wind's blowing at a little bit of an angle toward you like this, then your spreading scent downwind doesn't get into that downwind area, you see? And that's why I like it to be angling toward the cheek rather than toward my ear as I'm heading toward the stand site with a crosswind. You got that? Okay. Well, I got another important thing for you to know, to think about. Well, to know. Now, let's say you found a dynamite spot to sit. You know, let's say here's a feeding area. It's like this. Long, narrow one. It can be round, it can be square, it doesn't matter. But let's say you found a dynamite spot, and boy, have they been feeding in this feeding area here. And let's say it's a big one, and there's one doe family that lives in this area, feeding in this area, and another one over in this area, feeding in this area, and one way over here, feeding in this area. That could be happening. If you're hunting a feeding area where there's more than one doe and they're young feeding there, during the 2-week period the does are in estrus, the odds are getting to be pretty good. At least one of those does, one of the mature does and one of the yearling does are in heat on that day. And so your odds of seeing a big buck in that clear cut that day are 3 times better. And you can hardly ask for anything like that, where your odds are 3 times better than if there's only one in there, one doe, and they're young that's feeding in there. You can't ask for anything better than that. That's about as good as it gets. Now, here's another thing about that. Let's say here you are, and if the wind is wrong, let's say here's opening morning. You couldn't wait to hunt here. All kinds of tracks and big droppings, 1-inch droppings out there, shiny. Holy cow, I can't wait to get there. And let's say here it's opening morning and the wind is blowing in that direction. Now, a lot of guys say, oh, I don't care. Maybe I'll get lucky. I'm going to go there anyway. You aren't going to get lucky because your scent blowing out all over here is going to alarm all deer around that area. Here comes somebody, a hunter, and they stops here, and all of a sudden the source doesn't move anymore. And then the deer knows that's not changing. That's a stand hunter. He's laying in ambush over there. I don't want to go out here anymore. That is such a mistake. Well, it's really agony when you have to wait around for the wind to finally get blowing in a direction that you can finally get out there without the deer that feeding there knowing. And I know Ken, before he got as big as buck, opening day he had an adverse wind where the wind had been on his tail all the way to a stand site, and he knowed better. So I just got to wait. Well, the next day the wind was in a favorable direction, went around 180 degrees, and he got the buck that morning. Now, when you got just one stand site, you're stuck with whatever wind direction you have. And you know, if you're a guy that only uses one stand site all season, how many times that wind was blowing on your back when you went to the stand site. when you have no, you don't have any control over winter, but that's where you figure you gotta be in that tree up above the ground where you can see all over here and no place else. You're just wasting your time. So, now there's a way to get around this problem. Set up 2 stand sites at right angles to one another, one here or one here. Doesn't matter which way, but here's where the deer are, and you got a right angle set up like that. See that? They're right angles to one another. You can be there or there, not over there, but right angles to one another. Now, let's say you can't wait to get to the stand site opening morning, and the wind is wrong for that one. But for here, it's a crosswind. You can hunt there anyway. You got a second stand that's going to allow you to do it.
Okay.
Say the wind is coming from this direction. Well, it would be great for that one in the morning, early. Maybe not so great for this one, you know. So, but there again, you got a wind direction from this direction. Now you know you can hunt there or this direction. Well, what if it's coming from this direction? Well, it'd be just great for that, and possibly great for those if the wind direction angles away from this stand site as you're coming. Or if the wind is growing from this direction, this would be fine, and maybe a crosswind on one of the others. But when you got 2 stands at a right angle to one another, at a great stand site, great spot to hunt, it doesn't matter what direction the wind is blowing from, you got a spot to sit there. You're not stuck. So keep that in mind. That's a good thing to know. You know, you might hunt in an area where you don't have unlimited numbers of possible spots to sit like we do in this wilderness area with lots of cover at ground level. Maybe you're hunting on a farm. Maybe it's a 1,000-acre farm and there's brush and woods all around and things like that. Cattail swamps and who knows what all is out there. And you only got 2-3 spots that would be good. It would be mature buck effective to hunt on that whole farm. Well, in a case like that, you could better have 2 spots like that, each one of them. And that'll give you, instead of 3 spots to hunt, and maybe ruin all of them within 3 days, because those bucks are so good at finding you, you know. You got 6 spots to hunt. Or an endless number. Let's say you're going to hunt there for 10 days, and you can always be in a safe place to hunt as long as you got 2 stands like that at a good stand site. So, at right angles to one another. Good trick to keep in mind. Don't pin yourself to one. Us Nordberg, we don't pin ourselves to more than 1.5 day. We change stand sites every half day. But we're always thinking about that right angle thing. We are. Because boy, when we got a spot, we can't wait to hunt. If we just have one spot, that gets to be pretty agonizing and waiting for that darn wind to change to a good direction for it. So, yeah, and then, you know, since, well, you know, half of us are still hunting from tree stands on opening weekend. And so when we're out there scouting early, that half is looking at tree stands, and generally, not always, depends on how much time it takes to do all this. Generally, they'll have at a good place like that on a feeding area especially, well, you can do this work on a bedding area as well, like a doe bedding area. But anyway, when does are in heat, this idea works anywhere, and it really can make a difference between a successful season and one that isn't. So that greatly improves your odds of taking a big buck. So another thing, you know, you keep putting all these odds together that improve your, you know, your chances of taking a big buck, and they add up. Let's say you had 6 reasons to believe your odds are improved at a stand site. That's almost a sure thing. I mean, you don't find a lot of those like that. But when you do, it's almost a sure thing. You end up at noon saying, it happened just like I thought it was going to happen. Well, gang, this is long enough for this seminar. Now, next seminar, I'm going to go back to where we started, talking about all the things we're going to review, and we'll talk about each one of the things that we're looking for. I'm going to review all the things that make a mature buck stand site, mature buck effective. Hey guys, time to leave. Now, be sure you get your books. So remember, gee, I just talked about 50 different things and you can't remember them all. They're all in the book. Thanks a lot for watching. And before you check out, please subscribe, press that red button down below, and hit that thumbs up button as well. With that, okay? And I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.